Are you pleased to see the back of the lockdown?
Look, we haven't had a lockdown for a wee while yet, but I think New Zealanders will be feeling good and reassured that there aren't any in the foreseeable future.
Why not scrap just all COVID restrictions? It's in the community now. Why are we still having isolation periods when most of the world has ditched those requirements?
I don't think most of the world has ditched those requirements, and in fact, one of the reasons that we've been able to keep our case numbers at a reasonably manageable level are the relatively minor interventions of things like, isolation periods for those who have it, and the use of face masks. And effectively, we're leaving the door open to having those things for next winter, when we could see a significant resurgence in case numbers. But we're taking most of the things that we've done previously off the table.
Why do you need the legislation to last for another couple of years?
Well, obviously, we've still got another couple of winters to go, and one of the things that we're aiming to do is have something that's more enduring in place, that's available for other pandemics, but also other, significant disruptions to the health system, which we have to be aware that we could see more of in the future.
Can you tell us more about the inquiry into the COVID-19 response by the government?
Cabinet's had some conversations about that. We're not in a position to announce anything at this stage, but I've always been very clear, although it's not my job at the moment. Well, it is and it isn't. I'm acting minister at the moment, but I've always been really clear that I think, as we got to about this point, it would be the right time to do something more formal and more sort of arm's length than we've done before. We've done regular reviews as we've been going along, but I think we are getting to that point now where a more structured review and forward look to make sure that we've captured the lessons that we needed to and that we're prepared for any future events. I think now, we're getting close to that point now.
To what extent will that feed into any future pandemic legislation?
Well, I think that's one of the key things, is we want to capture the lessons from, the last 2.5 to 3 years to make sure that we are better prepared and that we have got things lined up in the event that the country has to do this again.
Is it likely to be a
I'm not in a position to say on that yet, but I think if you look at the sorts of inquiries we've had, sorts of things that have triggered Royal Commissions in the past, Royal Commissions have been triggered for smaller things than the COVID-19 response.
Can you guarantee there will never again be a lockdown for COVID-19 and you'll never even need to do things like mandate scanning QR codes?
Well, as I've always said, when it comes to dealing with a global pandemic, there is no such thing as a guarantee, but I think it's highly unlikely that we're going to see the need for that again in the event that something unexpected happened. So we got a new variant of COVID-19 that was different to every other variant that we'd had before, that sort of set us right back to square one again. Then the Parliament would have to, reauthorise the use of any restrictive powers. At this point, I don't think that that's a likely, or even, it's certainly a highly unlikely scenario.
Is this just virtue signalling then, taking out tools but saying, look, we can't reach this if we need to?
No, I think I've always also been really clear that the COVID-19 Public Health Response Act is an extraordinary piece of legislation, and it's one that does give the government of the day unprecedented powers to do things, and therefore it should only be available to the government as long as there's a genuine emergency situation. Countries that have far less respect for the rule of law and far less respect for democracy have these sorts of laws on their statute books on an ongoing basis. That's not something that we should have in New Zealand. So as soon as we're in a position where we can't justify the emergency nature of some of the powers, then they should be removed, and that's exactly what we're going to do. And that's not unprecedented. We had unprecedented emergency response powers after the Christchurch earthquake. As soon as we got past the emergency phase of that was watered down. So we're following a similar process here.
Other political parties have called for an inquiry into the COVID response for months now. So why have you ignored those up until this point before deciding that yes, you will have an inquiry?
Well, no, we certainly haven't ignored them. What we've always said is that we wanted to get past the emergency response phase. We wanted to get through winter, and then that would be the appropriate time. Bearing in mind that the people who are going to have to respond to, a commission of inquiry, whatever form that takes, are also the people who have been on the front lines dealing with the pandemic. And so we want to give them some clarity so that they can actually engage in whatever form the inquiry takes.
Thank you, Minister.
Right, I'll get out of the way.
Right
Thank you.
Thank you. Are you happy to see the back of the lockdown?
Look, every New Zealander, I think, is pleased to see us coming into that new phase, as we have been for some time, of COVID management.
Do you need to do an inquiry effectively before you scrap
the COVID legislation altogether?
As we've said for some time, we do think that we need to go back and look at as a whole at our experience from COVID. We know, unfortunately, that in the future we're likely to face other pandemics. We need to learn from this one and make sure, like civil defence, we have a set of arrangements ready to go for whatever circumstances arise.
Prime Minister, how much responsibility does the government need to take for the new inflation figure out today, given non-tradable inflation has actually risen over that period?
Take into account, though, of course, when you look at non-tradable inflation, for instance, across things like construction, 90% still of goods used in that area are imported, and so you see that crossover. Looking around the world, New Zealand is one of the few countries where we're starting to see it peak and come away. We are rare in that regard. Many other countries, it continues to increase, and that's because of those global pressures we're seeing.
Have we got a message for the Reserve Bank?
No, and given their independence, I wouldn't. But I do have a message for New Zealanders. We know it's tough, and that's why right through to the beginning of next year we've kept that reduction off fuel at the pump, half-price public transport, that increase in the family tax credit, all around trying to just ease that pressure.
Prime Minister, did you know that Damien O'Connor had met with Barbara Kuriga about her family's involvement in the ongoing dispute with MPI?
No, couldn't speak specifically on that.
No, so he didn't tell you that?
No, and nor would I expect necessarily for him to tell me about every interaction with an opposition spokesperson in his area.
Do you think it's strange that he wouldn't tell you about something like that, given the conflict of interest or perceived conflict of
No,
interest?
not necessarily, no.
And when did you know about the Mike Heron investigation?
When some of these things were publicly reported.
Have you ever
I will just make sure, and then I'll finish with you.
When will New Zealand get by the vaccines?
Sorry?
When will New Zealand get by the vaccines?
Yeah, look, this is one of the things that we continue to get clinical advice around. So that's where we're guided by our doctors, our clinicians, on what's needed to provide the greatest protection for our population. I haven't received advice on future vaccine purchases at this stage.
Months away, really.
I couldn't give you that timeline, Ben, at this stage, but the team keeps abreast of what's necessary for the variants that are coming through, but probably a question best placed for Minister Hipkins at this time.
had a car damaged by a pothole?
A car damaged by a pothole? Certainly not in recent times, no. Thanks, everyone.